All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to AI for Developers. We are getting started. My name is Cyril, and I'm going to be your host tonight. Just a quick poll. Who is here for the first time? Nice. A lot of newbies. OK, that's cool. So AI User Group is a community of professionals interested in learning about the latest AI technologies. So usually we do meetups almost every week. So we have like 3 topics. One is AI for marketing, AI for design, and AI for developers. So it's AI engineering. And also we have a large conference coming up. It's going to be on April 15 to 17. And same thing. One day is for AI for marketers. Second day, AI for designers. Last day, AI for developers. For our community, we are offering a killer deal. I don't think you're going to see a conference cheaper than this. So jump on it. It won't last. So it's $49 for one day, $99 for 3 days. So if you're interested in other topics, feel free to take a pass for 3 days. Discount code AIUG-ROCKS, because we rock, or we try to. All right, so before jumping in, we have, we need to refresh the computer because we have a new slide that came in. So conference is April 15 to 17. So April 15 is going to be Marketer Day. April 16 is going to be Designer Day. And 17 is going to be Developer Day. It's at Fort Mason, so a very large venue. And we are expecting 1,000 people. So it mostly depends on you if you are joining or not. But we are hoping to have like 1,000 people. It's going to be 4 tracks. 3 workshop tracks and 1 main stage. Main stage is to discover new tools. Workshops, it's to actually learn to implement them. Workshops are like 50 minutes long, so it's really hands-on. It's going to be great, so you should check this out. Now, so it's the first time like someone contacted us to say like, hey, I'm launching on Product Hunt, and I would like to present that day at your meetup. This is Guillaume. So we are a community of builders, so a lot of members, you can come, a lot of members are building stuff. Probably some of you are also building stuff. If you are launching something, you can talk to me and we can organize the same thing. Guillaume?
Thank you, Cyril. Thank you for hosting this event. Just in few words, Basalt helps teams, engineering and product to integrate AI in their product faster and with higher quality. We provide a tool to streamline the process of crafting, evaluating, deploying, and monitoring of AI feature. As Cyril said, today we just launched our product on Product Hunt. We are currently in first position, but it's really tight, so I am counting on you to upvote us on Product Hunt and to leave a comment on it. You can join me at the booth after the talk, just to talk about Basalt. Thank you.
Okay, let's give Guillaume a round of applause. It's like pretty tough to launch product, and these guys are killing it on Product Hunt. Feel free to take your phone and scan this code and give some love to Guillaume to support him with his launch. All right, I'm going to just leave this slide for a few seconds. All right, and now this is the agenda for the day. So first, Rabi going to present building AI agents that users love, which a lot to say here. So Rabi, you can come here. Second, it's going to be Denis. Will talk about using AI to solve real problems for development teams. And then Joe will present teaching Gemini with data. After that, we have an open mic. So open mic is you guys coming here. I just give you the mic. And if you have any announcements to make, that's the right time. If you are hiring, if you are looking for a job, if you are launching something, if you are looking for a co-founder, again, we are a community of builders, so you come, you present. We have like amazing stories of people who met co-founders or hired amazing people here, so that's a good time to do it. And then we're gonna have pizza and networking. So we're gonna network and meet more people. Rabi, let's plug your computer. Let's switch.
Okay. Give me a second.
Amazing. All right, let's go.
Okay. So first of all, thanks for having us over. Thanks, Cyril. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, in one line, if I have to describe what we do, we are the generative UI company. And hopefully, throughout this talk, I'll be able to explain better what generative UI means, at least the promise that it has and how to deliver on it. But this presentation is not so much about Thesys as such. It's more about generative UI and why you should care. Like the talk said, building agents that users love. And I think that's been one of the major missing points from all these conversations about building agents, building agents, building agents. Like a lot of people are building agents, but right now not a lot of people are thinking about how to build ones that users actually love, right? So let me begin by talking a little about why is this important now? Why do we have to talk about this now? And the fundamental reason is basically LLMs, right? LLMs present a fundamental shift in how we interact with software. So for example, earlier, if you have to build any software, like through this demo, through this presentation, I'll actually take the example of personal finance app, but the concepts are more generally applicable and you can think of it in any of these applications that you would have built throughout your career. So LLMs, why they matter is because A, they represent a way to interact with software in which the software understands you more than you have to understand the software. But conversely, it also presents this difficulty in how do you design for this world? How do you care about all the things that the user care about? Is it easy to use? Is it easy to discover? Stuff like that, right? And basically, Thesys as a company tries to solve this. It's a combination of a tool that a product manager, a designer, and a developer would want to use together to build these interfaces. And coming back to the topic, generative UI, basically, right now, it's all about like building these agents that do some sort of text in, text out. And throughout this presentation, I'll actually try to convince you that you don't need to limit yourself to doing text in, text out, right? Text in, text out is great for applications like, let's say, ChatGPT, which have to answer pretty much everything that the user asks. But if you are building a specific agent, a vertical agent, or even like, for example, a personal agent that can do 10 different tasks, there is a better way of designing, there is a better way of building this. So generative UI, if I have to just summarize everything, it's basically, these are user interfaces that are dynamically generated in real time, and they provide an end user experience customized to fit the user's need and context. What it is not is also equally important, like generative UI is not so much about text to Figma or text to design, though obviously some of the fundamentals remain same. But generative UI basically says that instead of just making a version of software for everyone, which is what people are used to doing right now, you can custom make a version of, make a software that is customized at runtime to give a dynamic experience. And again, like I said, throughout this presentation, I'll take the example of personal finance app, but you can pretty much imagine it in any other scenario. If you had to build it today, if you have to build it like 2 years ago, this is how you would typically think about it, right? Like a product manager or a designer would sit together and come up with few screens. They would design these screens on Figma or any other tool for that matter. And then they would hand it over to a developer who would code these up, work with the backend teams, etc., etc. But they were always finite. They were like 5 screens to begin with, 7 down the line, etc., etc. But let's just try to reimagine this personal finance app. And actually, this is the presentation. This is the Figma prototype that started Thesys. We have come a long way since we built this, but at least I'll try to reimagine what a personal finance app can look like, right? So you go into this app, and we call it Fino. You go into Fino, and you just start asking, hey, how much did I spend last month, right? And instead of just giving you a boring text-heavy answer, it now starts generating UI on the fly. You can follow it up by asking, where all of these expenses? And it will tell you, no, looks like 1/3 of them were investments and 2/3 were expenses. You can follow it up by asking, like, what did I spend on? And now it will take that amount, take that context that you had spent like $2,898 and break it down into categories. You can follow it up by asking some more qualitative questions. For example, am I spending a lot? You can ask whether it's all on your credit card. And you get the point. Basically, I have a few more slides here, but you get the point that it doesn't have to be this very text-heavy thing that we are used to right now with all the agents that we see. And in the end, this is not just about conversations and asking questions, but it can also take actions. For example, at the end of this journey, you can ask it to, okay, I want to set a limit on my food expenses from now on. And it will basically, it will ask you to input this amount, which is a form element, and ask you to confirm that. Again, these patterns were pretty common when we used to design SaaS, when we still design SaaS, for example. But somehow in the agentic world, this is getting lost, and people are just relying more and more on these text-heavy interfaces, right? So how do we build this, right? How do we break it down into digestible chunks that we can start thinking about, reasoning about, and actually building? The most important part is definitely intent, right? Intent is very explicit in this case because the user is asking you directly that how much did I spend last month? There is contextualization because spending, for example, somebody has to understand what spending means, right? Somebody has to contextualize it in the context of if somebody asks, am I spending a lot in India versus am I spending a lot in US? Those context also matters what a lot means. The most important part obviously being data. You can't build something like this without connecting to an actual data source that has all your personal finance history and credit cards and everything. And then basically a level of personalization. Now again, this is a fairly unexplored topic right now of how you can personalize these apps. But the easiest example that I can give is something like GPT memories. Over time, ChatGPT is understanding what you like, what you don't like, what your background is. And now when it presents an answer, it has that personalization inbuilt into the app, agent or app itself, right? Coming to the last part, that's the GenUI engine, and that's what we build as a company. And the GenUI engine has a lot of moving parts, but I'll show you a demo towards the end. But it needs to be grounded in some design principles. It needs to understand everything else, and it needs to represent this data to you in a way that makes sense to you, right? And we are not very far, honestly. You can very easily build a agent or a app like this today. It's I'm pretty sure maybe people in the room have already tried building something like this, where you connect your data sources, you add a few functions, add a few tools, integrate an LLM, and now suddenly you can chat with your data. So if you integrate, for example, your personal finance history, you can start asking the same questions that I showed you, right? And this, like I said, this has all the other moving parts that we talked about. It has access to your financial transactions, which is the data part. It has access to current world knowledge, a lot of this knowledge is actually inbuilt into the LLM itself. But for things that, for example, are very specific to your application or very specific to how you cater to businesses, you can actually teach the LLM through prompts and add a added layer of context on top of what the LLM already knows about the world, right? There is implicit context, obviously. There is the conversation history. For example, if you ask where all of these expenses, that itself doesn't mean anything unless you look at the history. And then obviously you have the query part, which is did I spend a lot? Okay. So now that we have this, we are here, and at least I think we should be here. This is not so big of a jump for us in terms of where we want to be, because now suddenly we are saying that, okay, so you have the data, you have the context, you have everything. It's also about representing, right? So it's also about building these apps that the users love and can interact with better, and not just like dumping like 1,000-page answers to your users and like expecting them to understand this. So from this point, I'll actually show you a small demo of Thesys Canvas, and I'll come back to Canvas. Think of it as a tool for PMs and designers and even like engineers to collaborate on and visualize what you want to build. And Crayon is the SDK which basically will help you ship this. So give me a second while I set this up. Okay. Yeah. So, like I said, Canvas is a tool for designers, product managers, and your team to first collaborate and visualize what you want to build. Think of it as a design co-pilot for building AI agents. So you probably are using something like a Figma or something to build these static screens and just like trying to capture the essence of what you're trying to build. But Thesys presents a much better way. Like again, since we are taking the example of personal finance assistant, I'll just continue with that. And what I can do is, instead of, like, I can obviously go and create things manually, but since it's a design co-pilot, it can actually start designing on your behalf. And instead of you beginning with a blank canvas, it gives you a pretty good starting point. So for example, give it a couple of seconds, and here, for example, it's generating this flow that what happens when the user just logs in or just comes to that app, right? They are presented with a few options. For example, create a budget plan, investment guidance, etc. Now, obviously, you can prompt it to generate more flows. You can prompt it to generate more responses. But even this is a great place to begin, because what you can do is you can jump to this prototype view, and you can just like start iterating, start whiteboarding, start brainstorming with your teammates in what you want to build. So, for example, it has this flow on the canvas, which is a way to represent how your dialogue should flow. You can continue these conversations. You can like create things that are not there. For example, this has no follow-on, so you can create a response for this. But coming back to it, basically, this is a canvas end of the day. You can pretty much create any response. I can try to create a response. I can try to generate it with AI. For example, I'll ask it, user wants to know how much they spent last month. And again, instead of just presenting this answer in a text-heavy fashion, it is already recommending me a better way to represent this, right? The good part is it's not just limited to visualizing and drawing on the canvas, but it has this code mode, where basically a code gen mode, where it gives you live working React code for this. In an ideal world, you would take this, templatize this, integrate your backend, and enrich it with the data, right? Like I said, this is the canvas, and Crayon is the SDK which basically helps you ship this. So if you are, for example, if you use like OpenAI and a fast API in the backend, you can use Crayon, which does the front-end state management, which basically like exposes a very like easy to understand but a very flexible protocol in how to stream this data from your backend to your front end. And I won't go into the like nitty-gritties of Crayon here, but please go check it out on crayonai.org. It's an open source MIT licensed package. It's a repo that you can use to build these agents. And this has all the boilerplate necessary for you to stitch your backend agents with these like generative UI experiences that we just talked about, right? So coming back to the presentation itself, let's see. Yeah, so that was the canvas. and this is Crayon. And like, feel free to just like play around, give us feedback. We just launched Canvas around 20 days back, and the reception has been great, but we always want more people to try it out and give us feedback. And yeah, that's it from my side. Would love to take any questions you have.
Cool. Thanks, Rabi. Let's give Rabi a round of applause. Do we have questions? Yes.
Yeah, great presentation and product, first and foremost. But just for my own curiosity, on the back end, is the AI or the LLM, sorry, given access to where the code is hosted to ship those dynamic changes to for the UI, or is it being updated on the DOM kind of on the fly? Could you kind of briefly explain that?
Right. So, like there are different approaches, but the approach we take is basically you don't need to stream that entire React code to the front end, or the backend doesn't really need to understand the React code as such. They need to understand that there are multiple, the backend needs to understand that there are multiple ways of representing this information, and it's almost like an identifier. So they can just, like the backend sends that identifier with the data for this template, and the actual React code just sits in the front end.
Hi.
Hi.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
I just have a question about like what kind of UI we can expect from it. Like you said, it's generative, but it has to be basing these UIs off of something. Like, have you guys made templates from somewhere that it draws from, or does it kind of make this up off on the fly and then eventually pull from that on its own?
So do you mean how do we generate those things on the canvas, or
Well,
how would a person integrating this actually ship this?
more so like because it seemed like the UI that was generated was kind of like the specific style. Where is it pulling that style from? Like, do you guys have templates that it uses as a base, or does it just make that stuff up on the fly?
Okay. So I think like you're asking about our canvas and how do we do AI on our canvas. So for that, the answer is quite simple, that we actually are grounded in the style elements that you set up at the project level. So for example, because I just went through the onboarding, it skipped this part, but you can come back on this and set it up to be a specific style. And when we generate stuff, we always maintain that coherence. So for example, there will never be a case where one button is green and one button is purple, because we are drawing this, like you said, the ground truth for design rules are coming from this tab. And there are a lot of bells and whistles, but we are always adding more controls here.
Okay, that answers it. Thank you.
Yeah.
More questions?
To follow on that question, so, today's UI.
Just a sec, because I don't hear you in the back.
To follow on that question, today's UI involves a lot of marketing assets and a lot of designer activity to create something that's truly unique and not just boilerplate. How do you solve that problem?
So for example, there's always going to be this push and pull between consistency versus innovation in design, right? So for example, what we do, we have biased it more towards consistency. That's why when you use all our assets in an actual application, they'll look coherent and they'll look as a part of one application. But at the end of the day, when you're shipping this, there is no restriction in what you ship. For example, there might be some components that we are never generating, but you can always bring a designer and a developer in-house to build those components and ship it in your final application. So think of this just as a starting point, but it's not restricting you to actually ship this in your final application.
So my question has to do with, you were talking about how it then gets into the app. So where can you show maybe the next couple of steps if you're like, oh, I like this UI, I want to be able to take it into iOS, or I want to put it onto Android or something like that. Is that the next couple of steps, what that would be? Thank you.
Right. So we only support React for now. but I'll take the same example that you asked and try to show you. So basically, let's see. So this is the documentation for Crayon. It's publicly available. You can just go and see the steps. But there are more than one steps right now. What you need to do is first install the Crayon SDK. And just by installing the Crayon SDK, you'll get like a shell, you'll get a setup with your backend responses and everything. And now the next step would be enriching those responses and integrating all the things that I showed you on Canvas, right? So the minute you integrate the shell, you get like a very simple interface, very simple but a very similar interface to ChatGPT, where you can ask anything in text and it would start responding in text. And from there on, you will start iterating and refining it and bringing the things that we did on Canvas. So the first step in that is basically setting up the schema for your response templates. And once you have these, like basically what you do is at a high level, you have these multiple response templates. For example, one helps you visualize your spends. One helps you set up budget with a form element and everything. And then the UI, then the backend basically dynamically chooses one of them based on multiple different ways of doing it. Some people like doing tool calling in the backend, tool calling from the front end to the backend to implement this. But for us, we prefer a slightly more structured outputs kind of way where the LLM itself chooses, okay, so I have this data and I have these 10 templates of visualizing the data, which one should I choose? But you would do that, you would bring the schema here, then you would basically set up, let's see. So the database setup is probably not relevant here because in this guide, I'm just talking about how would you connect it to a SQL database that can fetch the actual transaction history and everything. The next one would be just setting up this chat endpoint. Again, the chat endpoint is pretty simple. What you do is set up a prompt, explain to the LLM what you are as an agent, what you are supposed to do, etc., etc. And then you just pass it basically these response templates, the schema that we set up in step 1, and the LLM at every invocation chooses which response template and which data to fill it with. Yeah.
Hi, yeah, thank you. That was very impressive. I'm just looking at it, and it seems to have everything there. I'm just trying to imagine where you want to expand as a company. I mean, do you just have a certain amount of apps that people can create? Are you just trying to expand that, or where would you even go further with that? I'm just wondering. Thanks.
Okay, so let me tell you this. This is still in some ways like semi-manual kind of setup, right? Where you need to bring in a developer, where the developer needs to understand all the schemas, the structure of responses and do. Where we want us to be as a company, and something that we are going to launch in like another couple of weeks maybe, is this a truly generative UI experience where it goes beyond these response templates that I'm talking about and can help developers, like enterprises for that matter, ship these way richer agentic interfaces than they are today. So for example, imagine something like Einstein from Salesforce. We want to be there where the developers at Salesforce can integrate with us, and instead of giving you like a 1,000-word answer for everything, they can do this at runtime dynamically and show you a response. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I did not want to bring it up today because this is not public, but in case you are interested, please go to thesys.dev/c1 and sign up for that. Once we launch, I think it will be fairly easy to understand where we want to go as a company.
So I have two questions. One is more into the details. So if I, as an end user, you gave me a response in a form of a pie chart, and I don't quite understand it, and I'm like, can you represent the same information in a bar chart or some other style? I'm assuming that interactivity is there.
Absolutely.
Great. And the second one was a bit more high level. As a startup who may see value in using something like this, I'm assuming, again, some APIs or some open source code is or will be made available for someone who wants to integrate this Gen UI?
Yeah, so we have this crayonai.org, which is our open source repo of how to build these generative UI experiences. Like Crayon AI, think of it like a React for doing these generative applications, right? This is completely free, completely open source,
Yep.
MIT license for commercial uses. You can use it today.
Right.
And we have another repo on our GitHub, which is github.com/thesysdev. Wait, let me just bring it up. And we have a few examples. The thing is that we are still working on improving the documentation for these examples, but you can just go to these, for example, Phenocrayon, the presentation that I just showed. You can check out this repository, run the code, just add your OpenAI key, and you will be able to see the actual application built using Crayon.
All right, we have time for one extremely fast question and an extremely fast answer.
Hello. Good work first. I have one question, like when we do this UI through generative AI, like even in V0, one of the requirement is like, hey, everything is great, but these two portion in this UI, I need to update. Like that's a partial thing. Is it possible with your solution? Like where you like you say like, hey, in the whole UI, these two areas, I want to basically redo this part and don't touch the rest of the UI.
I mean that instead of just ripping and replacing the entire application, put this in a part of the application.
Yes.
So it is definitely doable. So the way Crayon is structured is basically it's a hierarchy of React components. So the topmost component is basically that entire screen, that entire interface. But below it, there are a lot of like these components that you can use. For example, we have the component to just render a message. Now, using that component and integrating it into your rest of your React app, you should be able to do this. I will admit the documentation is not so great at that point, so it will be a little difficult. But if you jump on our Discord, I'm more than happy to help you figure out that exact component and how to place it in your app. But yeah, since it's React, like you can compose it in different ways. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Rabi. Let's give Rabi a round of applause.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Rabi will be available during the networking session if you have more questions. I know you guys had a lot of questions for Rabi, so he'll be available.
There we go. Good evening. I'm Denis Pilarinos. I'm the founder and CEO of Unblocked. Thanks so much for coming today. I'm going to tell you about some of the problems that we've been solving using AI. So the talk is, it was too long to put on the slide. So the talk is called Solving Real Problems for Developers with AI. And so what I thought I'd actually do is set some framing, set a little bit of context. And it's at the risk of like potentially being like overly obvious. But at a very high level, when I think about the life cycle of software development, it's really kind of distilled into 3 stages. The first is gathering context. What's all the information that you need to understand about your system, about your application, about your code base before you can start making any changes? Why do things work a certain way? Why were these decisions made? Things of that nature. The second thing, once you have that context, is obviously to go and implement it, right? To go and actually write the code. And so if you think about this in the AI world, this is where you might use tools like Copilot, or you might use tools like Cursor, things of that nature. You're going and actually making that bug fix or improving the application. Finally, at the end of it, when you've got the context, written the code, you build it, deploy it, monitor it. It's kind of a feedback cycle. It's a terrible graphic. It should actually go around and around and around, but you get the idea. Here's where Unblocked plays, right? This is the problem that we think a lot about, which is how much time do we spend gathering information about the application? And so all that observation is a consequence of my own personal experience and the team that I work with. I've been building developer tools for the better part of 20 years. I started my career off at Microsoft, working on developer tools there, and became one of the first people to build the Azure platform. I worked in AWS at Amazon. I started a company called BuddyBuild, which is a continuous integration platform for mobile app developers. Sounds like someone's head was nodding. I don't know if you used it, but anyway. And then that was acquired by Apple. And so I worked there for about 1.5 years. So I've been building software for developers, building engineering teams and running engineering teams for a long time at a whole bunch of these different companies along with my coworkers. And the thing that we realized is that almost irrespectively of how big or small your team is, getting the information that you need is insanely time-consuming and quite painful. And so how does it work today, right? Like, it's an interesting statement. How does it actually work? Well, first, it kind of happens in two ways. The first is, you interrupt your coworkers, right? So if you're physically co-located, maybe you tap someone on the shoulder, right? But typically, for a lot of teams, that's Slack messages that you're sending or you're getting inbound. And so those interruptions are quite expensive and over time can be quite annoying. If you don't do that, you're quite eager. I'm from Canada. We have a term called keener, someone who's very keen. Maybe you actually go and dig through a bunch of documentation. You look through Jira and Slack and Notion and Google Docs, all these places to find the information to get those answers. This is one of my favorite anecdotes to really like put a fine point on the problem that we're trying to solve. This is from a VP of engineering, one of our customers, and he said, this team is known for hiring very talented engineers, and he said one of his top engineers took 5 days to write 12 lines of code, right? Which is like, I think most engineers here, it should take a few minutes, to write those. Once you know what code to actually go and write, right? So his point here was that all that context setting was incredibly time-consuming. So that's one of the things that we actually recognized, or one of the things that we realized kind of ourselves, and then we wanted to see if this is a problem for other people. So in 2024, Stack Overflow released their annual developer survey. They had 65,000 respondents, and 53% of them said that they are actually slowed down waiting on answers. 63% of them said they spend between 30 minutes to 2 hours per day looking to get information, searching for answers. And 49% of them said they spend the same amount of time actually just responding to questions. So it's a problem that maybe originated from our own personal experience, but kind of validated that it's actually quite prominent within the industry. So what does Unblocked do? This is the problem that we're trying to solve. We take the source code as the source of truth, and we augment it with the data and discussions from messaging platforms like Slack, documentation platforms including Confluence, Google Docs, Notion, bug trackers, Linear, Jira, so on and so forth. So we basically try to build a full-blown knowledge base about your application from all of this information. Make sense so far? All right, enough slides. Let's actually see how it works. Sound good? So a little bit of context. I'm going to show you this. Can you see that okay? Great. That's a huge screen. I'm going to show you Unblocked. So context on the product. First, there's actually 4 clients. We'll see where we end up with time. Feel free to push me off. So I'm going to show you the 4 clients that you can use Unblocked in. And I'm showing it to you on our source code, on our Slack systems. It's a real demo on our real infrastructure, our real platform. I did, just a fair warning, I did a quick pass to make sure there's no profanity in our Slack channels, but between then and now, who knows what happens. So it's a live demo. Here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is ask a question that's very specific to our system architecture. I'm asking about something called the source mark system. And the source mark system, at the end of the day, just maps questions to source code. I'll show it to you when we get to the IDE. But what Unblocked has done is generated a technical, bang-on response to the question that I was looking at, that I asked. And the way it did it is by sourcing a lot of information from all these different data sources. So I can connect Google Drive and Linear, Jira, Notion, so on and so forth. And it pulls all that information together and generates this response. Now, like I said, I've been building developer tools for a long time. One of the things that you kind of learn is that developers are inherently skeptical. And so in order to validate and or help developers believe that this answer is actually correct, we surface the documents that were used from across those different data sources. It's been fun building this project. One of the learnings that we had, every single person who has ever used the product, as far as I've seen, the first question they ask is something they know the answer to. Right? Because they want to see, how good is this thing? I already know, how am I going to evaluate if it's good or not if I don't actually know the answer? So the first question they ask is, something that they're an expert in, typically, and then they look at all those references to see if it's actually generating the right response. So we surface the references, and then what we do is we actually surface follow-up questions. So that actually models how people typically work. If I ask someone a question, they don't answer just the question, they give me a little bit more context. So if you're asking a machine a question, it'd be nice if it would help you further expand your understanding of that question or that problem. So these are actually LLM-generated questions based on the question that you've asked, so you can further understand it. And then finally at the bottom, I don't know if you can see it in the back, but it's a bunch of names, and these are the people who are best positioned to ask follow-up questions, if you needed to, of a real person. So who's familiar here with Git blame? Do people know what Git blame is? Yeah? So Git blame basically tells you like who kind of mucked around with the source code most recently. It gives you the full history. It's blame because you get to go yell at those people afterwards. So think of it, you can think of this as Git blame, not only on the source code, but the entire knowledge base, right? So for this topic that we just generated, who is the person who talked most recently about it in Slack? Who's opened bugs in it? Things of that nature, right? So often, a lot of our customers have large code bases that are quite old, and a lot of people who wrote that code are no longer there. So a Git blame on that source code isn't going to give you a lot of value. Make sense so far? Yeah? Cool. Now let's move on to the second client. So that's the web experience. It's a bit of a contrived example because how many people have a web browser with a single tab open? No one, right? Yeah, not a single hand goes up. But it's good for demos. We'll get to how we solve this problem in a second. Let's take a look at sourcemarkengine.ts. This is one of the files that was actually referenced here. So I'm going to pop into VS Code. Oh, you can still see that. I love this screen. You guys did a great job. So the Unblocked works in all kind of common IDEs. So if you use VS Code, or if you use IntelliJ, or PyCharm, or WebStorm, or Eclipse, any of those all have this plugin. And I'm going to open up sourcemarkengine.ts. And one of the things that we realized is that another learning from building this product is people actually learn information in two different ways. The first, asking questions, getting responses. And the second is what I kind of like to call colloquially spelunkers. People who have like a mental model or a picture in their head of like how that system works, and then it evolves as they get more information. So if they're reading a Slack conversation or see a design document or things of that nature, it will actually, their mental model for how it works actually changes. So what we've done is actually built something called this Insights panel. And what it does is it surfaces content or surfaces information that's helpful relative to the file that you're looking at. So in this case, I've opened up sourcemarkengine.ts. These are a bunch of documents that are relevant to this file. And as I scroll the file, you'll see that that list actually updates. So what it's doing is it's showing me the conversations or discussions that are relevant not only to this file, but it's scoped to the visible range of code that I'm looking at, right? So what are the documents that we show? Well, in this case, what we're showing is actually the pull requests that are specific to this file, scoped to that range of code. Why pull requests? Well, think of the life cycle of a pull request, right? Especially over a long period of time. There's a lot of meaningful conversations that happen often, right? Design discussion, architectural decisions, things of that nature. And when that pull request is merged, where do those conversations go? Basically into the ether, right? No one really finds them subsequently. So as part of the processing that we do is we take a look at those pull requests, we figure out which ones are going to be helpful, like good signal to noise ratio. So no one wants to see nit or thumbs up, thumbs down, doesn't help. And we augment the source code and surface it here in this way, right? So I'll give you an example of that. In this case, here's a pull request from 2 years ago, and I can click into it, and it's going to take me to it directly in GitHub. So it's a handy way of seeing basically this conversation directly in the IDE. Here it is. Now, I'll go back to GitHub for a second. A lot of teams, including ourselves, so that's why I'll describe it this way, have this very degenerate behavior where they copy and paste a link out of GitHub, right, this pull request link, and they stick it in Slack, and then a whole other conversation ensues around the pull request in a totally different system. One's in GitHub, the other's in Slack. And so that's quite painful if you're trying to like really understand the end-to-end scope of it. So what we've done is link them together. What you can see here is I can actually launch that conversation here back in November 10th, 2022. This is the Slack conversation from a channel that I might not have been aware of or been a part of related to that pull request. So what we're doing is basically starting to stitch together a lot of this context or this information that's helpful to you, no matter where it might live, right, across all these different data sources. Now, I said there's basically two modalities, right? People who like to Splunk is the second one. We're not going to forget the question askers. So, of course, in Unblocked, I can select a region of code, and I can do things like ask it questions about that specific code. And what does this do? Now, there's a lot of code generation tools that exist in the market. One of the things that Unblocked is uniquely positioned to do is understand the source code relative to the entire system architecture. So when I ask this question, Unblocked isn't limited to effectively the context window of the LLM that we're using. It's able to contextualize that question relative to the entire system architecture. So if you are a team that's replatforming, or the picture I always have in my mind is the game Jenga, when you're like trying to move one of the blocks and you're like, if I make this change, what happens to it, right? So you need to know the full end-to-end, what's the coupling between these various systems. That's what Unblocked is able to do for you, because again, it's not limited to just the code that you're looking at. Of course, you can ask Unblocked to generate code for you too, because it is LLM based. And one of the things that we do here that's quite unique is actually adhere to the coding standards of the team. So if you have design best practices, right? So for our organization, you're not allowed to write a regular expression from scratch. If you write a regex from scratch to validate an email form or something like that, you're going to get absolutely eviscerated when it comes to pull request time, right? Because you've introduced either a security vulnerability or a maintenance nightmare. And so Unblocked, if it needs to use, if it's going to use a regex, it's not going to write it from scratch. It's going to use from one of the libraries that we've kind of said are kind of blessed and common within the code base. So it's generating code in a way that's actually adheres to the coding standards of the team. So that's a quick overview of the IDE. I'm going to jump now to Slack. Now, one of the things I'm going to ask here in Slack, I don't know if folks in the back can see it. Oh, that made it worse, not better. Hold on a second. Slack was down all day today. I was stressed about showing this demo today. So one of the things that is really hard about building developer tools is breaking into the habit loop of an organization. So in this case, what I'm trying to demonstrate is this very common behavior, where an engineer will join a channel, as an example, like a support channel, right? You might have like Ask QA or Ask DevOps. And they come in and they ask their question. Now, of course, now demo gods are like messing with me. But typically what happens is Unblocked will actually recognize that this is a question that it can answer. So an engineer doesn't need to do anything. They can just ask the question and get the response. Of course, it's not doing that now, so other problems. But typically what happens is you get a response directly in the thread. And that's helpful because if you are in a time-shifted environment, right? If your part of your team works in a different time zone or what have you, asking these questions and waiting for answers could take a while. If you become keen, once you become aware of Unblocked, you can actually @mention the bot, hopefully this works, and we'll actually get a response directly in the thread as well. So in this first case, I'm kind of tempted to try it again. Let's see what happens. If in that first case, what Unblocked is doing is looking, it's doing a semantic analysis to figure out, is it a question that I should ask? And if it does, is there a chance that I can give you a really, really good answer? And if those criteria are met, it actually goes and generates a response. But that requires cognitive load of the user to know to use the product. Developers, most people in general, don't want to have to learn new tools. They just want to move on with their workflow. So apologies that didn't work. But one of the things you'll see here is that I've actually started to ask questions in a public channel, right? I'm asking them in this public engineering channel, but that could be any channel. It could have like thousands of developers in it. One of the things that we learned as we were building this product is that different teams like to work in different ways, not a surprise. Our predisposition is that we like to work in the open. We think that there's benefit in sharing the questions and the knowledge that people actually have. What we found over time, though, was people would actually reach out to us and say, like, hey, I don't really want this question to be visible by other members of my team. Is there a way that I could make it effectively private? And we're like, yeah, we actually have a feature for that. It's called private or incognito mode, I think is what we called it at the time, or private questions. And it's represented by this little eye icon here. Now, one of the deficiencies of this initial design was that it was over here on the right. And it wasn't on by default because they're like, no, everyone should see everyone's questions. So we'd explain this to them, people were super happy, and then we kind of did this thought experiment of like, well, what if we made it more visible and changed the default behavior so that questions were private, so that people didn't have to worry about their coworkers and they were willing to, judging them potentially. When we made that change and kind of displayed it, what do you think happened? The number of questions skyrocketed, right? People were now no longer subjected to the potential like imposter syndrome or any concerns that they might have around people, thinking they're like, don't know what they're doing or what have you. So, that's in all of the UIs, like of all the UIs that we've built, that's how you can ask questions of Unblocked, get immediate responses, and not have to worry about anyone judging you about it. Now, how do you do that in Slack? You do it like this. Actually, I'll do this one, hold on. I'm gonna ask a question that I probably wouldn't want to ask in a public channel, right? What did Pete work on in December 2024? Maybe Pete's not doing so great. Maybe we're doing a performance review for Pete and we want to get a sense for like what's going on. So here, what Unblocked should do is actually take a look at all the questions or take a look at all of Pete's pull requests and actually generate a summary of all those pull requests from December 2024 and summarize that for me and make them visible. I'm not sure why it's not doing that. I have to apologize. Slack has been having some issues today, if you're aware of that. So I think they're batching up a bunch of webhooks effectively. So typically what would happen is it would show you an answer here. Now, we kind of transitioned from like being able to ask questions in private to also now doing something. I was talking to a gentleman earlier that you weren't able to do before. Like AI is doing something that is like actually pretty remarkable. And that is it's not doing just search, right? It's actually generating information based on the information that it has available to it. So I'll give you a very concrete example of that. If I ask Unblocked to show me a diagram of our SAML like OAuth flow, right? There is no document. There is no Notion document or wiki page, or we have nothing that describes this workflow because honestly, it changes on a fairly frequent basis, right? As we support different SSO providers and so on and so forth. So what Unblocked is able to do is actually reason about the source code, a handful of those documentations, pull it all together, and actually generate, if folks are familiar with mermaid diagrams, they're able to generate a mermaid diagram that we're able to then go and render. So it's not just search, it's actually generative in that way, right? So being able to ask Unblocked, like, how does this system work? Show me a sequence diagram of how that works back to back, is something that people have loved about the product, right? Just really getting insights into how that system works and all the context that you need so you don't spend 5 days writing 12 lines of code. You can just like quickly get answers by asking questions. Now, I said there was 4 clients. The web, IDEs, Slack, which is not a great demo today. Thank you, Slack. And then the last one is this Mac app. It's a standalone Mac app. I'm fascinated by kind of human behavior and like things that people do. This is one of the most popular clients. And a lot of the configuration is actually, it's basically the same experience that you have, right? We talked a little bit about this in the past. My actual tab, my actual Chrome instance has probably 60 tabs open. So instead of having to find the Unblocked tab, I can hit Command-Shift-U. I get this thing immediately here. People often have 2 monitors set up, and so Unblocked is in one window, and their IDEs over here, or whatever tool that they're using to ask questions about. So this app will show me exactly all the questions that I've had and gives me the opportunity to ask additional questions. It's just another client that people really like because it's directly at their fingertips. Back to the slides. Try to keep those to a minimum. Yeah, that's a backup. What are people saying? These are a handful of our customers, people who use Unblocked on a daily basis. They say things like it saves them 1 to 2 hours per engineer per day, or it helps them find that information, or one of my favorites, because it's what we were trying to aspire to, it's having like a senior person on the team who's available 24/7. Most of the questions that I ask are on Sunday afternoon or Sunday night. I don't want to be bothering people. And so I just ask a ton of questions of Unblocked. It's been kind of a game changer for efficiency and focus. And those are just some of the things that some of the customers have said. Who's using Unblocked? Tons of teams. This is a handful of them that are comfortable with us telling them that, or telling folks that we use them, but there's thousands and thousands of devs who are using it. And so it helps validate that, like, you know, we are solving a real problem, and hopefully using AI in a way that, like, you literally could not solve this problem in a way meaningfully in the past. So that's Unblocked and the problems we're solving.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Denis. Okay. So we have time for a few questions. Who want to start? Here.
This may be a kind of newbie question, so pardon, make it private. Traditionally, if you wanted to fine-tune your LLM to understand your enterprise, you would use a RAG to, you know, train the LLM, and then you could ask questions. Does this obviate the need for that, or does, in other words, if you use this system, you have that, the exhaust, I guess, of the enterprise, the zeitgeist, and then it could just kind of pull up an answer? Is that an alternative to the traditional fine-tuning of a model?
Yeah, so effectively there's two approaches for contextualizing what I would call like non-world knowledge, right? So like if you want to take your existing knowledge base across all those different documents, right? There's, broadly speaking, kind of two ways of implementing it. One is fine-tuning, and the other is effectively RAG, retrieval augmented generation, right? So the trade-offs there become very, very obvious at a very high level when you're working with enterprises who care a lot about security, and specifically document security. When you do fine-tuning, the way that works at a very high level is you basically throw all the documents into the models and kind of bounce them back and forth until it understands it, right? Hand waving dramatically there. But one of the things that it sheds is that those documents and any of the access control associated with them gets lost. So fine-tuning doesn't actually give you the opportunity to maintain document security. What I mean by that, very concretely, whereas RAG does. Concretely, let's say you and I worked at the same company, you have access to a document in Google Docs, or you have or Confluence, it doesn't even matter. What happens is if you ask a question and Unblocked determines that you knows who you are and your access credentials, it will use that document to generate the response. If I don't have access to that document, Unblocked knows who I am, says I don't have access, and won't actually use it as part of the response. It might actually, like if you ask, you know, you work, let's say in HR as an example, what's the salary of my manager? You would get an answer. Like it can pull that information in. RAG enables that. I wouldn't get an answer because it knows that like I don't have access to the salary information in the organization. So it's effectively permissions aware, like access controls. We have a feature around it called Data Shield. If you're fine tuning, all of those the access control is lost. And if you think about it from a runtime perspective, the underlying system's access control changes all the time. So you can't fine tune every time someone changes the access control for any kind of asset in one of those data stores. Does that answer your question? Okay, sounds good. Well, happy to chat about it some more. Yeah.
Okay, actually, pretty much half of my question is answered already. But you know, the sources, right? Like, you know, where do you maintain those sources, and if they are secured sources, like, you know, where you maintain those
the data.
Security information?
Yeah, for sure. So a couple things. Like I said, this is not the first time I've built a system like this that kind of caters to these types of requirements or what have you. Buddy Build took people's source code, built it in our infrastructure, and then deposited a binary. So Unblocked arguably deals with, it's kind of strange. People are very comfortable sharing their source code, but once they connect Slack, they get very, very uncomfortable. And I'm like, we don't read DMs. We don't have access to DMs. Suffice it to say, yeah, the security model that we built is SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. We have regular penetration tests. We have all the kind of, actually have a white paper that describes the full system architecture and the security model that's associated with it. That tends to alleviate any of the security concerns that a lot of organizations have. You know, we do all the things that you'd expect. Encryption at rest, it's, you know, encryption in transit, per organization keys, the whole kit and caboodle. We work with large financial institutions who are comfortable with our security position. Sorry, yeah, the gentleman over there. Sorry, there's someone just behind you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have two questions. The first is, how like the data from, let's say, the source code, is that being does Unblocked have access to it after it's been published, after it's been pushed? And also like the conversations that come up that Unblocked answers, does that also become a part of the data, and does that lead to any weird feedback type of situations?
Yeah, so first, I think what you might be asking is like, how often is the data kept up to date for the source code? Is that right? Yeah, so both source code and all those other like all those other systems have various ways of like making sure they're kept up to date. Within source code, as an example, some source code providers like GitHub are actually quite resilient in the way that they provide updates to third-party systems. Other source code providers, I'll let you guess, it's a lot more of a manual process, but it doesn't tend to be an issue where you need to be immediately up to date for data. It's absolutely an issue for access control, right? So we have a demo, the feature is called Data Shield, but we have a demo where it's just like, you can go to Google Docs, remove someone, like they ask the question, they get the answer, you remove them from the document, and they ask the question immediately after, and they don't have access to it again. So that's the first question. The second question was, sorry again?
When you supply Unblocked.
Oh yes, yeah, super, yeah. You're one of a handful of people who actually picked up, there's a little meta thing here, right? So we have all these different data sources, right? Source code, documentation systems, blah, blah, blah. The questions that you ask Unblocked actually become data sources, right? So I think you're maybe the sixth or seventh person who seeing the demo kind of came to that conclusion. For those ones that are private, obviously those don't get repurposed. But if you have a question that you think, oh, this is actually really helpful, there's a way in the UI to say, like, make this available, viewable, and part of the knowledge base so that people who ask related questions will get the benefit from that answer as well. Yeah, well done.
Hey, great presentation. I really enjoy it. So I have a question. When a client or a worker can ask like privately the question, like in the private mode, that doesn't encourage like to all workers do it privately, not to expose themselves, and that like also losing more time, like because it will generate the idea over and over again independently and not like remembering if it's not private the question, like it will not save.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is like, if the same question is being asked over and over and over, and they're all done, but the same thing, right? But it's all private, isn't that not an effective use of time, right? Yeah. Wouldn't it be better if it was just public? I agree with you. Like, that was my conclusion as well. Turns out we're both wrong. People would rather just like ask questions in private because they don't care they just want the answer. They don't care if it's visible to someone else. People are very motivated by their own interests. And so they're like, if I ask a question and I get an answer within a few seconds, good enough, right? If someone else has to do the same thing, that's a them problem.
But for the company, they would prefer to be public, so maybe.
Yeah. So as a engineering manager, I was like, there's no such thing as dumb questions, and every once in a while someone proves me wrong. Yeah, I was like, oh, sometimes I prove myself wrong. Yeah, I agree with you.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Are you using your own LLM or are you using third-party, the traditional ones?
Yeah, we use both frontier and foundation models depending on the workload, for sure. Yeah, generating our own LLM. I think that day will come. I think it's insanely cost prohibitive at this point in time versus like the benefit that you get, especially the rate at which these things are evolving. Yeah. I remember our first like OpenAI bill, I almost like fell over. Now I was like, yeah, whatever.
Sorry, we don't have time for more questions, but Denis will be available, right, during Q&A. Thanks, Denis. Let's give Denis a round of applause.
Thank you.
And next in line, it's Joe, teaching Gemini with data.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. I'm Joe Malone. I work at a small startup named Google, and I am here to talk to you about how to teach Gemini on your data. So I work on Google Cloud Platform, and I'm specifically focused on BigQuery. I'm a product manager for BigQuery, so for today you can call me BQ Joe here on the name tag. So quick show of hands, how many people are familiar with BigQuery as a data analytics platform? Awesome. Who uses BigQuery? All right, for a piece of swag, does anybody want to yell out what BigQuery is used for? Yes, cool. So originally it was launched as a data analytics warehouse. You throw data inside of it, you can run really large queries very easily. So the greatest thing about it, the experience is super simple. It's very serverless. So you just load data in up to petabytes worth of data, and you can run SQL queries on top of it. Here we're just running over terabytes worth of data, doing a regex match and doing some groupings. Runs in just the order of seconds here. And data warehousing, if you're not familiar with the space, consider this like a competitor to Snowflake or Redshift. Databricks is also supporting SQL, so it's a data analytics platform. So, like I said, why would you build, using BigQuery? For developers, I'm in front of many developers here. Some of the key value propositions are that it's simplicity. It's really serverless. It scales very large for underlying data tables. That's the order of petabytes. And then price performance, especially in batch query processing, data processing. This is a place in which there is a lot of efficiencies and price performance to gain. For admins, decision makers, usually observability and governance of your data stack is where BigQuery is really helpful for. So you can manage the bills and make sure that they're not ran up. But I'll focus primarily on the developer key value propositions today. So where does data play in while you're building your AI applications? So BigQuery itself, we do not see this as an opportunity to create AI applications. And in Google Cloud, this other V-looking logo over here is Vertex, which is our Google Cloud platform for AI applications. So where we see the key opportunities is providing data services at scale for simplicity for all your offline use cases to support some of your online use cases when you are using infrastructure or models that are hosted on GCP. So a lot of our customers who are using BigQuery are sort of manage the offline processes when working with the online applications that are built on Vertex or Google, the Kubernetes engine on GCP as well. So let me talk to you a little bit about the problems that AI faces that we see BigQuery being able to support. So we know these problems. AI hallucinates. I have some, I think we all have a story about interacting with an AI agent, and we've gotten some funny answers out of that. There's also data is not always in real time, or the models themselves are not always in real time, and having to train them on new model takes a long time and it's resource intensive. So there's solutions to those problems. You can either, I think there's mentioned in the last presentation, you can use the data for training time to improve the model and accuracy, or you can use it at runtime to, when you get your inference, you can ground it based on data that you have from your enterprise. This is typically what we know when development as the RAG processes, or retrieval augmentation generation. We pass in some chunks, some relevant context. We have the LLM summarize it, and then it's much more accurate because it's based on real data. Now, the problem with supporting things like retrieval augmentation generation or data processing at large is there's no real one-size-fits-all to data processing. And you look at all the guides online about how to do effective RAG, there's a bunch of different ways for chunking strategies, embedding the models, and they all have trade-offs, and they're not able to be validated until you get to the end and actually see the quality of outputs by your AI agents. So this means that constant experimentation is crucial and needed. And then finding the right amount of context is crucial to grounding, and then data quality is always an issue. So for BigQuery, we just want to provide a platform to help you do all this in one place with minimal data movement and at least do your prototyping in one place where your data resides in a cost-effective, scalable, simple way. Cool. A lot of steps on one slide, but this is to set up the roadmap for the demo that I have very shortly. Oh, everyone okay? Such a surprising slide that someone blown back in their chair. So multi-step process. So here's sort of the typical steps that you would employ in a retrieval augmentation workflow. You would ingest your data, typically a document, into a single place, process it, so you extract the relevant text out of that document, chunk it into meaningful pieces that represent the data that you want to eventually retrieve. You would embed it using a vector database, an embedding generation model to basically semantically compress the relevant chunks so that you can search them at retrieval time. Then you go to search. You use a search algorithm to find the right chunks based on the text that you passed in your search. And then given your top K of most relevant chunks that are interesting, you can summarize them using an LLM. So here I'll show you how to do this all in BigQuery. I'll cover you a couple key concepts here. One is object tables. These are representing non-tabular data. That's something new for BigQuery. BigQuery machine learning, which is our connective tissue between our AI platform Vertex and BigQuery. And then Gemini at the end, used to summarize all within a SQL dialect. Okay, switching over. So here we are in BigQuery, and if you're familiar with the platform, this is sort of the SQL editor. Now, one cool feature that I'll show you initially that has been useful for demoing and to show end-to-end workflows is a UI experience called Data Canvas. So I'll click up here, and you'll see what happens is we sort of zoom out and get a sort of workflow view. I'll be moving through each one of these steps in one single canvas. By the way, I'm sorry, Rabi, I think you also have a canvas. We have a canvas, but this is a data analytics canvas, and I think they all match sort of the user expectations of communicating complex concepts in one single view. So I'll move through this, and we can keep track up here and to the right of where we are at our workflow. So up into the center, what I have is this object table. And this is a metadata representation of a file that's stored on GCS. So if you see the details here, our GCS is our Google Cloud Storage, object storage that we have in GCP. If you're familiar with S3, this is the Google alternative. And I have a preview of an underlying document. So you'll see here, this is a document from the Board of Governors around changes in US family finances from 2019 to 2022. I can click over and actually see what that document looks like. You'll scroll through here. I'll just call out Board of Governors Federal Reserve System as some key text on one of the initial pages, but this document is, many pages long, containing tabular data, textual data, and so on and so forth. So I'll come back here, and because this file is represented as an object table in BigQuery, I can interact with it within SQL. So I can just run a select star versus that object table. I'll get some interesting metadata back, or not so interesting, I'll be honest, of just the file type, the size, some hashing, description, things like that. Now, the next step within my RAG workflows I have here is I actually want to extract and chunk meaningful information here. So I'm going to skip running this because I only have a few minutes, but trust me, it takes about 15 seconds. And what's returned here is a JSON extract of many different types of chunks. So you'll see that Board of Governors Federal Reserve is chunked into my initial chunk. Based on the settings that you put in this processing option within the JSON, you'll have the overlap settings and the splitting settings that you would get from standard chunking methods. The next step I have here is extracting this into tabular format. So I'll go ahead and run this just to show you that this is a working demo. And this actually does execute. But you'll see that I'm doing some JSON extract in Scalar. So this is where BigQuery really shines in being able to process data. While I'm just doing one object here, This can execute across thousands and thousands of documents all within SQL. I'm extracting the JSON, putting in chunk IDs, content, page footers, and then from that unnested version of that JSON extract that you see in that previous node there. So the next thing I want to show you is how we take each of those individual chunks and generate embeddings off these. So if you're familiar with embedding models, I did a highlight. If you're familiar with embedding models, they take, if it's a multimodal model or a text model, it will take the input data, in this case it's text data, and it will generate a many-dimensional representation of that model based on that data so that we can do comparisons of similarity against other types of files that are also put through that embedding generation model. So you'll see in this first tab, or this first column here, the ML generates output there of our embeddings. So you see pretty complex. It's just an array of, I think, 768 floats that are used for that comparison. Now, the cool thing about this is that one, we're accessing the text embedding generation model that's available in Vertex, all just within SQL. So I've enabled that model to be accessed within BigQuery, and it just runs on my data. The next thing that BigQuery makes easier here is I can actually create a vector index on top of that embedding column so that we can accelerate the searches as they go. And each new document that's added in will automatically be embedded and then added into our index. So then we have this nice sort of running index for anything new that's added. It's automatically searchable in real time. The other thing that I'll call out here too, when I get back into the slides, is this supports a proprietary algorithm that Google developed called the scan index that helps to maximize the resources when you do your similarity search within the vector search later. So I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get in the slide. Short story, it's cool and it works at scale. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run that actual vector search query. So let me break this down a little bit. The thing that I actually want to look at into the document, remember this is about household incomes within the late 2010s, and I want to know, did the family net worth increase? If so, by how much? So what I'm doing is passing that back into the generate embedding model, taking that text that you see here, running it through the embedding model so that I can do a similarity search, do a vector search against all the embeddings in the previous table that has all those chunks, and then returning just the top K. There are some tunable parameters here that will help balance sort of recall and the type of distance that I want based upon my use case. But all of these are able to be changed with really just changing the options that we have within the SQL that you see here. So I'll go ahead and run this. It's going to return 10 responses here that are similar semantically to the sentence, did this typical family net worth increase? So I'll just take a look at a couple of these. You'll see, okay, this actually does have some information about increase slightly between 2019 and 2022. There's another one here that does have some interesting information as well, but it's not really in human, it's kind of tough to parse, and we don't actually have some reasoning around what the clear answer is there. So this is really where, passing it into an LLM and grounding the LLM generations with the outputs from the vector search help to provide a much better answer. So I'll run that again, the same question, but I will also pass it to the Gemini Flash model that's supported within BigQuery as well. You'll see here that the function that we have here is ml.generateText. This takes an LLM, takes your input within BigQuery, and then just generates text after that. So instead of passing in just the raw text of the question into the LLM, I'm also just going to do a vector search directly in there, so then I can pass in those top 10 that I got in the previous, all within one single statement. So I'll go ahead and run this. Okay, fairly quick. And you'll see one single answer. And it's very easy to read, right? So I actually pulled it out earlier, just so we can actually read this and see it a little bit easier. Is that simpler? Okay. A little bit bigger. Okay, cool. Eureka. So you'll see the response here. Typical family net worth saw a significant increase between 2019 and 2022 within the surveyed consumer finances. It increased the median net worth surged by 37% to 192,000, and 23% to about 1.1 million. So what this tells us is we have many rich people that are driving up the average income per household. Awesome. So all within one single place, you'll see I use BigQuery to simply access my data from GCS, transcribe the data, chunk it effectively, build in an embedding model, do a search, and then augment it to respond to a user-based question. Oh, I skipped my demo slide, so good thing it didn't go off the rails. All right, so the key components here is that BigQuery works with a lot of AI components using BigQuery machine learning. And where we're investing heavily with BigQuery is to get more models to be used with your data. You saw that effort show you the Gemini Pro model, but we also now support Gemini Pro Flash 2. And so many of the other models that are offered within Vertex, including Anthropic's Claude and Mistral. So we're very flexible around the model you can use, except for our friends in OpenAI. So just quick show of hands for us, is that a deal breaker if we don't support OpenAI, or? Okay, not only 2. Okay, that's okay. But sorry, we're working on it. Ingesting, so the great thing about these newer versions of these models is that they are multimodal and sort of multi-purpose as well. I saw this really awesome article from Sergey Filimonov on Hacker News where he starts to test ingesting millions of PDFs and why Gemini 2 changes everything. So rather than having sort of separate steps for ingesting, chunking, embedding, now you can use these multimodal models to point to do the extraction and the chunking all within one step. So that's what we're hoping to start tests within BigQuery as well, to simplify that even more and scale it out to even more documents. For the vector index side of it, what we're launching very shortly here in GA is that specialized index that was launched within, based on a Google research paper a few years back. And it's the same algorithm for doing scalable approximate nearest neighbor searches and distance calculations that is used by Google Search, Google Play, and YouTube. So especially at scale, this is where we see a lot of opportunity. And for BigQuery, knowing that scale is a big differentiator, our index size can scale all the way up to 10 billion 10 billion records, and still effectively do batch processes for those similarity searches. There's a lot of other places, and we're going to do support very soon. So I'll just go down, each step of the way. We are going to be announcing many of these things at Google Cloud Next, but I'll just, share this all with you and open to your all feedback of where we can be doing more sooner rather than later. By the way, Google Cloud Next is in April, if you are interested. But these are things that will be mostly announced there. So that object table right now that you saw, which represented the document, today it's just a read-only table, but we'll also be able to support writes as well to that table, so you can have your tabular and non-tabular data all within one single representation, and you can do your analytics on top of it. For the pre-processing steps, we're going to be supporting many of the popular frameworks for doing things like chunking in both SQL and Python. So if you're familiar with a lot of the LangChain frameworks for that, we'll also be able to support those within BigQuery and reference those as user-defined functions as well. For the embedding models, we're going to support bring your own embedding model. So if you have a favorite embedding model that's on Hugging Face, you can import that and use that as your embedding generation model. For the indexes, we're going to support partitioning. So if you have daytime partitioning, within your tables, that will also be supported within the index. A popular thing that we're seeing requested, especially for personalization, is that users have a specific zip code. That is a partition type, so you can do identity matching based on zip code, or filter down based on zip code and then do within the zip code. We'll also improve performance by using principal component analysis as a service within the index. This just helps to reduce the dimensionality of your embeddings, and this will improve performance. The search, you saw a little bit of, we had to translate to an embedding to do search, but we'll support direct text as well. And then augmentation, we already now support the other foundational models that are on Vertex. Okay, so what's next? We have, everything you saw today is available within a Colab notebook, so you can take this home with you and get started and start to test on BigQuery. There's a lot of other nitty-gritty details in there as well. If you have any questions around what you see there, you can reach out to me directly. Part of the reason I like to come to these events is that I do like to make connections with you all and hear what you're working on. So if you would like to reach out, have questions on the notebook, have questions around BigQuery, just excited to share what you're working on, that I'm excited to hear it. One thing I will plug, so we have considered sort of chunking and pre-processing for retrieval augmentation generation in the document space. That's the most common use case today. But one thing, what we really think there's going to be an opportunity there is applying those frameworks to things like video and audio as well, and doing that same sort of semantic compression that you'll see within the documents. We think there's even more opportunity in the video space as well. So if you're facing that challenge, we'd like to hear more and see how we can support you. Great. I think I started to throw so many QR codes at you, but this last one is a survey that you can take to just give us feedback. And then if you want to try anything with Vertex AI as well, that's the link there.
Nice. Thank you, Joe.
Pizza time, right?
Before pizza, we have time for questions. We have time for maybe one question. Do we have a taker? Yes? Okay.
Sorry, this is just the data scientist in me that was curious. But with respect to implementing PCA in the, I believe you said it was during your the vector searches. How does that work without losing out on maybe context or information?
Yeah, so we would run it while we build the index. So basically, we would identify the most important dimensions, and if we find that there are unimportant dimensions to complete the actual search, then we would basically underweight them within the search time. So the whole calculation is how do we ignore some of the dimensions without losing any fidelity in the actual search time. So that's the goal. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, guys. It's now time for you to join me here on the other side. First, so we are on different social media, so if you see some of our publications, please feel free to like them. It gives us some love and energy to keep going. All right, now, community news. So if you have anything to present, if you're hiring, looking for a job, working on something cool, working on something uncool yet, you can come here. We're going to start with Naya. And then Guillaume is going to show us a little bit of the interface. I think the QR code was nice, but seeing the interface is probably better.
Hey everyone, so I know that I am standing between you and food, so I'm going to be as fast as possible. So again, my name is Naya Macklin. I am a senior developer advocate with Neo4j. Has anyone heard of Neo4j before? Yes! Okay, family, I love that. So for those who don't know, Neo4j is a graph database and analytics company. So if folk have heard about RAG before, a lot of the times you come to us for graph RAG, so a graphical version of RAG. And a lot of people like to use Neo4j because when they're using graph RAG, it allows for easier explainability when it comes to their explaining their data. And people also come to Neo4j in order to better understand the patterns and the intricate details between their different data points, and oftentimes can be billions and billions of data points. So we just wanted to come up here and show support for this incredible community, AI for Developers. We've been sponsoring for a number of sessions with them, and we're so glad that you all have come to as well. If you want to learn more about Neo4j and GraphRag and how we implement it, I have a demo going in the back. So all the way in the back corner, come and visit me, and we can talk about what we have an open source demo here. It's called the LLM Knowledge Graph Builder, built with Python and React, where anyone can come and learn more about how they can interact with their data. So just a quick little introduction to us, and we hope you come and visit us soon. Again, I'm Naya, and I'm from Neo4j. All right, take good care, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks, Naya. Yeah, let's come.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sue Kwek. I'm a UX design leader with 15 years of experience creating consumer products for notable companies like Shutterfly and Amazon. I have worked with AI and other emerging technologies for over 10 years, from red-eye detection for photos, synchronized lyrics, as well as personalized recommendations. Right now, I am very interested in working with a cutting-edge AI company. And let's chat if you need an experienced design leader, either full-time or fractional. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to switch to Guillaume quickly. You can use this one.
Cool. Just to show you, this is the curves on Producton currently.
Guys, we need you.
We are the blue one, so we need you because, as you may look, we are just 80 votes above the second one. So please go directly on Product Hunt and upvote, and I don't let you go out without upvoting and leaving a comment.
There is no
I
way
swear.
we are losing this.
There is
no way we are losing this.
There is no way we are losing this.
Okay.
So you upvote, and I show you how is it going on Basalt quickly.
Okay, I want to see at least 50 votes by the end of our session. Okay, guys?
Cool.
So maybe show us the interface quickly.
Yeah, just to show you a bit of the interface on Basalt, I can easily create prompts and create chain of prompts. We have embedded AI to create prompt directly, so I can ask, I want an AI to answer support ticket, let's say, and create my prompt. To have our AI building directly the prompt with variables, with test cases, with all the parameters for your prompts. And here we go. We have a good prompt with all the best practices integrated in it. We can directly see the output of the prompt, and we can go directly in evaluate to put some data and evaluate it at scale with some evaluations criteria, such as LLM as a judge, custom Python script, or stuff like that. So I can create in 2-click an hallucination detector LLM as a judge and test my test cases on it to have an instant score on my prompt. It's a quick overview. Please follow us, upvote, comment on Product Hunt. I am counting on you, and yeah, good.
Yes, we have to win this. Cool. Thanks, Guillaume. You want to show the QR code, maybe? Oh, I can try it here.
Oh, cool.
All right, just if you want to give some love.
Again.
It's right here. Next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Melody. I'm building Conviction AI. It's a browser agent that generates automation for any web tasks that your applications may need. People have used it for data collection, performing data analysis on websites. One customer recently used it to collect product reviews across different sources and gather insights from support forums. So yeah, please come talk to me if you're interested in trying it out. Prior to this, I was an engineer at Apple working on infrastructure, so super into building infrastructure for AI. Just please come chat if any topics interest you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa. I'm from a Berlin-based company, so from Germany, but half American, so that's why my English is quite okay, I would say. Yeah, it's an agentic AI company, so our mission is to free humans from being robots. A solution for repetitive tasks, but also for test automation. And currently we have 4 job openings, for example, for a full stack engineer, tech lead, product manager, and a C++ engineer. So if you're interested, come talk to me. Also, we have an event this Friday happening in downtown San Francisco. You can find it on Luma. So you could potentially meet our founder and other speakers we have. It's a rooftop party. So maybe that's interesting for a Friday night, and we need some people still to sign up. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Veronica, co-founder and CEO of MakeInf. Quick show of hands. Is anyone building AI agents here? Couple. Okay, that's good. So our product might be for you as we're looking for beta testers. We just launched our product. It's an open source library of hosted AI agents and tools that you can integrate into your graph framework with a simple line of code, so SDK or API. Again, we're looking for beta testers, but also as we want contributors to contribute to our library. If you're building one, we'd love to integrate what you've built. And so yeah, come talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Cool. All right. How many more? 2 more. Okay, 2 more.
Hey everybody, I'm TMC. I do open source AI stuff, so I maintain the Go language fork of LangChain and have a bunch of open source AI projects. So if you write Go and you want to hack on AI stuff, find me on GitHub or here. Latest thing I'm doing is, don't tell Anthropic, doing a little reverse engineering of Claude code and working on like an open source free implementation. So come find me, come hack.
Hi, hi, I'm Steph. I'm a consultant in robotics. I do basically a full stack roboticist, I say. I do a lot of robotics infrastructure development and also AI integration. So I've worked on a number of projects over the past few years, machine vision, object recognition, navigation for autonomous robots using different AI algorithms, different models. Currently working on autonomous farm vehicles, and also last fall helped put some stuff in orbit. So if you do AI and you're interested in hooking that into physical things, Ghost in the Shell quote, "It has a voice, now it needs a body. I'm building the bodies. Come talk to me."
All right. It was a lot of content for tonight. Thank you all. That's all. Don't forget, before eating pizzas, give an upvote to our friends, and we see you next time. Okay, we do that every month.